Many people never hear is that before Elijah became the fearless prophet who stood before kings, before he called down fire from heaven, before he confronted the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel, God led him into hiding. He did not begin his mission with glory, with public recognition, or with miracles. Instead, the Lord sent him to a hidden place, the brook called Cherith, and it was there in obscurity that something strange and mysterious happened. The prophet was sustained in the wilderness, not by human hands, not by faithful disciples, but by ravens' birds considered unclean, creatures that often do not even feed their own young. Why would God choose such a way to care for his servant? Why not send a faithful family, or the priests of Israel, or a righteous king to provide for Elijah? Why hide him away in the wilderness and feed him through such an unlikely source? The story of Cherith is more than a detail in the life of Elijah. It is a divine message, a lesson written not only for a prophet thousands of years ago, but for every servant of God today. It shows us how the Lord prepares, protects, and shapes his people for their calling. And when we look closely, we find that Cherith is one of the most powerful symbols of spiritual preparation in all of Scripture. Elijah appears suddenly on the stage of history. Without introduction, he comes from Gilead, a rugged region, and walks straight into the royal palace. There, he speaks directly to King Ahab, the most corrupt ruler of Israel at that time. His message is clear: there will be no rain, no dew, no blessing on the land except at his word. Imagine the courage of that moment. Elijah was standing against the king, against Jezebel, against the system of idolatry that had captured the heart of the nation. His words were not simply about weather. They were a direct blow to Baal, the so-called god of fertility and storms, whom the people trusted. Elijah was declaring, "The Lord, the God of Israel, not Baal, is the true ruler over creation." From that moment, Elijah became the most wanted man in Israel. As the skies closed and the land began to wither under drought, the people would soon look for someone to blame, and all eyes would turn toward the prophet who dared to speak against their king. But here comes the mystery. Instead of giving Elijah a throne, instead of giving him an army or public influence, God gave him a command that seemed almost the opposite of what we would expect. He told him to go eastward and hide himself by a brook called Cherith, near the Jordan River. Why? Why would God tell his most powerful prophet to disappear just after his greatest moment of courage? Why hide him when the nation needed to hear the truth? Because God's ways are not like ours. The hiding place was not a retreat of fear. It was a strategy of heaven. Cherith was the place where God would protect his servant, but also the place where he would prepare him. The name Cherith itself carries a message. In Hebrew, it means to cut off, to separate, to break away. It was not just a location on a map, it was a spiritual lesson. At Cherith, Elijah was cut off from the crowds, separated from applause, distant from both praise and criticism. Here, he was alone with God. And sometimes this is the way the Lord works with his servants. Before he places them before people, he first removes them from people. Before the public mission comes the private shaping. Before the noise comes the silence. From the outside, this might have looked like abandonment. But, in truth, it was divine craftsmanship. Cherith was not a punishment. It was a school. The prophet was being forged in silence, strengthened in solitude, and prepared for the battles that lay ahead. Now imagine the scene. Elijah sits by a small brook, hidden in the wilderness. Morning comes, and with it, ravens swoop down, carrying bread and meat in their beaks. Evening arrives, and the same happens again. Twice a day, the unclean birds obeyed the command of God, feeding his prophet. Think about this. Ravens are scavengers. They are known for being selfish, even neglecting their own young. Yet here they become faithful servants of the Most High, providing for his prophet. Why would God choose such a method? Because he was teaching Elijah and us that his provision does not depend on human logic. He can use what seems unclean, unworthy, or even impossible to show his power. The message is simple. God can provide from any source at any time, in any way he chooses. At the same time, Elijah drank from the brook. Notice it was not a mighty river, not an endless fountain, but a small stream vulnerable to the drought that was sweeping across the land. This was not abundance, it was sufficiency. Every sip of water reminded Elijah that his life depended not on reserves, not on human effort, but on God's faithfulness day by day. He could not store up food. He could not save gallons of water. Each morning he waited for the ravens. Each day he drank only what the brook provided. God was training him to trust moment by moment. But one day the brook dried. The sun burned hotter, the skies remained closed, and the little stream became only cracked earth. Was this the end? Had God abandoned his prophet? No. The drying brook was also part of the plan. God was saying, this season is over. It is time to move on. And here we learn another lesson of Cherith. Even scarcity can be part of God's strategy. The same God who provides in one place may close the provision in order to move us into the next chapter of his plan. What looks like loss may actually be transition. From Cherith, God sent Elijah to Zarephath, a town in Sidon, the homeland of Jezebel, and a stronghold of Baal worship. Think about it. The prophet who had been hidden was now sent into enemy territory. But this time, he would not be the one receiving provision. He would become the channel of provision. At Zarephath, a poor widow, preparing her last meal, would meet the man of God. And through him, she and her household would be sustained by a miracle. Do you see the progression? At Cherith, Elijah learned how to receive. At Zarephath, he learned how to give. At Cherith, he experienced God's provision for himself. At Zarephath, he became the instrument of God's provision for others. This is the hidden wisdom of God. He trains us in private so that we can serve in public. He teaches us dependence in obscurity so that we can demonstrate his power openly. When we step back and look at the story, we see that Cherith was not just a hiding place. It was the prophet's secret classroom. It was where Elijah was separated, sustained, and shaped. Without Cherith, there would be no Mount Carmel. Without the hidden training, there would be no public victory. Cherith teaches us that God often works in ways we do not expect. He hides us when we think we should be seen. He provides in ways we cannot explain. He allows certain streams to dry up, not to destroy us, but to direct us. And perhaps most importantly, Cherith reminds us that sometimes the greatest victories are prepared in silence, in solitude, away from the eyes of the world. What does this mean for us today? It means that when you find yourself in a season of obscurity, cut off from recognition, perhaps even from people, it does not mean God has abandoned you. It may mean he is preparing you. When your provision seems strange coming from unexpected or even unlikely places, remember that God is showing his faithfulness. And when a brook dries up in your life, when something you depended on is gone, do not panic. It may simply mean that God is moving you into the next stage of his plan. Like Elijah, we all need a Cherith, a place where we learn dependence, trust, and humility, a place where pride is cut off and faith is deepened, a place where we discover that God is enough. Cherith was not the end of Elijah's story. It was the beginning. After the hidden years by the brook, after the lessons of dependence and silence, he would stand before kings, confront false prophets, and call down fire from heaven. But none of that could have happened without Cherith. And so the message is clear. God hides his servants, not to weaken them, but to strengthen them. He leads them into silence, not to abandon them, but to prepare them. He allows their brooks to dry up, not to destroy them, but to guide them into new chapters of his purpose. The mystery of Cherith is this. The hidden place is the place of preparation, and those who are willing to be shaped in secret will one day be used in power before the world.